Hello and welcome to Patient World. Today we're blessed to have the special guest, Dr. Dan Morhaim. Welcome to the show.
So glad to be with you.
Okay, so glad to have you here. Let's get started by letting you tell the audience all about yourself.
Well, my main career was as an emergency medicine physician, 45 years frontline in big urban and suburban hospitals in Maryland primarily, but California before that. But I've also was a volunteer physician at a homeless clinic in downtown Baltimore, worked on the Navajo Indian Reservation, overseas in Jamaica after a hurricane,
Wow.
Saudi Arabia and Kuwait after Gulf War I. So that was my clinical experience. I also have a political experience. I was elected to the Maryland State Legislature from Baltimore County, Maryland for 24 years. So I served in office for 24 years. And after leaving office, I continued in a variety of political roles, so to speak, nonprofit boards appointed by and some government boards and task forces. The way it works in Maryland, 3 months a year, you're in legislative session, and the other 9 months a year, back to working shifts. So that was my life for 24 years. And my ER experience informed my politics.
Awesome. You have such a wide variety of things you've been dealing with. And so I'm sure you've dealt with everything from people in abject poverty to people who are probably millionaires, made a ton of money. So your experience is unique. Not everybody has that sort of background. So can you delve into the things that you feel that the public really needs to know that they may not have access to now, or information that they may just not know at this point?
Let's start with one that we're all going to face, and that is mortality.
Absolutely.
Now, it wasn't easy bringing up the topic of end of life care. Most people want to run to the hills, but and it wasn't easy running for office and being in office. Delegate Morhaim, what are you working on? I'd go through the usual issues, and then I'd say, I want to talk about your death and the death of everybody you know, and don't forget to vote for me in the next election. So, but this is really about your theme, patient empowerment, because there are free, readily available tools that enable all of us, for just completing some simple, straightforward paperwork, to be empowered when the end comes. And so I would ask folks to consider this question. Now, it's hard to wrap our minds around it. We don't like thinking about it, but the end comes for all of us. So a 5-second exercise would be, when the end comes, where would you like to be physically? Where are you? Who's around you? And what's going on? I'll give you a few seconds to think about that. Now, what most of us say is some version of at home with our family and friends around us, pain-free in a comfortable environment that's holistic and family-centered. That's what most of us say. Nobody says killed in a fiery car crash, and nobody says dying in an intensive care unit long past any hope of recovery, tied to tubes and monitors with our family down the hall. Now, I want the best that modern medical care has to offer. It's amazing, but has happened that I've seen in my own medical career. I want the best of that. But there comes a point in time for many where that sort of service becomes more hurtful than helpful, becomes unnecessary and unwanted. And it's time at points to allow natural death. And that's a reality. But instead of being, we can't change death, but it's the run up to it where people can shift a great deal of the experience of what's happening and make it something that is not quite so terrifying, but actually something that is normal and natural. And that's something that all of us can do. So there's these forms called advanced directives. And I partly got into this out of my ER experience. I was doing codes, and Dr. Hester, what those are, full court press procedures on people. And I used to say, we did this and that. And then I had to own it. Say, no, I was the one doing it. I was the one putting in the tubes and the windpipe and the IVs and all that kind of stuff. And too many times it was like, if this person had only expressed what they want, I would respect that wishes. And unlike TV, where these things are successful 80% of the time, in real life, it's fractions of that. So the empowerment aspect is complete your advanced directives. And unfortunately, only about 40% of Americans have completed it. And in communities of color, it's about half that. And I know that because I did the study of that when I was on the faculty at the School of Public Health at Johns Hopkins.
That is so vital. I can't begin to tell you of all the times that I had patients who were obviously at the end stages of life. And, when you don't know what a person's wishes are, and the nurse walks into the room and they're basically at the end of life, if it has not been established, the natural thing is you have to err on the side of caution, do everything possible to save the life. And so what you're saying is so vital, because there are frequent times that people, they don't want the tube down the throat. They don't want to have, to live on a ventilator. They don't want all the drugs. That's just not what they want. But unless it is clear to the healthcare providers are going to do whatever they can to save the life. And so that information is so important to have.
And this is for everybody over the age of 18, by the way, all adults. We might think of it just for seniors, but the three most famous cases in American legal history were women under 30, and Cruzan, Quinlan, and Shivo. So it's a living document. What you do when you're 22 or 32 or 52 or 82 or 92, it's going to be different. Our values change, our health changes, our spiritual orientation may change, relationships change. And so the one that I use, and you can get advanced directive forms from any number of sources, state health departments, state attorney generals, AARP, but I like mydirectives.com. Here's mine. I print out a little QR code with it. It's free. It's online.
Right.
And you can change it anytime you want. Just go online, the usual name and password, and you change it. And there's times when heroic efforts are entirely appropriate. But there's also times when it's better to get early palliative care, early hospice care, and you can put things in an advanced directive. Maybe we should review what an advanced directive is for a moment. Would that be appropriate?
I think so.
So it's a 3-part document. The first part says, how much care do I want? It's basically, the full court press, do everything, and at times that's appropriate. The other is allow natural death on the other end, which may colloquially called pull the plug, just to be direct about it. But most of us choose the middle path, which is, hey, as long as I'm functioning, kind of aware of what's going on, not in horrible pain, keep me going. And if there's some mild illness in between, please treat me. But if it's a serious, purely downhill course illness where I'm just going to be comatose and tied all up, then I don't really want that. But you can also put things in there, like mine says, take me outdoors as much as possible. If I can't be outdoors, show me the outdoors. Mine says I want vodka and medical cannabis. Mine says I want control of the remote. Here's kinds of music I'd like to hear. Here's people I'd like to have visit. The second part of the advanced directive is who makes decisions if you can't make them for yourself. Remember, if you're making your own decisions, then you get to call the shots with the clinician that's taking care of you, the clinical team. But this is when you're not. So typically you choose a spouse, but adult siblings, but it could be anybody that you trust. You should have a conversation with them. And let me be candid about my own life situation. My wife, Shelley, and I get along great, and she's first. That's easy. I have 3 adult children. They're all good people. 2 of them were really on the same wavelength. So if Shelley's not around, then I give it to the other 2. But the third, it's a good person, but we're just not, together on a lot of issues. So let the 2 make the decision. And I also say, here's a couple of friends, one from medical school, that I'd like to be consulted, not to be decision making. And you can choose that kind of thing. And the third thing is body disposition, whether you want to donate organs, which I highly recommend. When I was in the legislature, I revamped the organ donation laws in Maryland, and they've done great things. But you could donate your body to medical science. You can specify the kinds of funeral or cremation that you may want. I'll editorialize here. Cremation is a huge carbon footprint. I would advise people to avoid that. And there's now coming up all over the United States and recently in Maryland, something called natural burial, green burial. It goes back to what we used to do without all the liners and vaults and cement. If you drive by a conventional cemetery, there's enough stuff buried there in metal and concrete to build 40 houses, each with a swimming pool. And my personal taste is I don't choose to have my hard-earned money spent to put me in some elaborate casket and monument. Just put me in the ground in a shroud, a simple, and plant a tree and have a party and give the money to charity. That's what mine says. But it's up to you. This is about empowerment.
Exactly.
You get to choose. You get to decide what's consistent with your values and orientation and culture and faith. And that's actually really helpful.
And you discussed a very important issue that a lot of doctors deal with, and a lot of family members end up arguing about. Let's say that mom is in the hospital and there are 3 or 4 kids. Two of the kids
Mm,
they do everything, and the other two say, mom wouldn't want this. That has the potential to create tremendous friction. And the last thing anybody wants is to pass on and let her loved ones end up separated for the rest of their lives, just thinking, well, they didn't do what mom wanted, or just having that friction. And so that's another reason it's so important to have it delineated exactly what to do. That way, you don't have to worry about your children or your spouse or your stepchildren or anybody arguing. And then when you leave this place, then your family is split apart forever because of that. So that was an excellent example.
I'm so glad you made that point. You're absolutely uh, correct. We're a very me-oriented culture. It's all about me. But actually, if an advance directive, which only takes place when you aren't making your own decisions, kicks in, it's when others are making the decision. And those kinds of conflicts occur all the time. So it's really, if you really love the people you say you love, they'll take care of this paperwork because you won't want to leave them. You don't want to leave them in distress and confusion. Gee, what did Dan want? What did Grandpa want? Should we do this? Should we do that? And it actually was a transformative experience early in my medical career where I was taking care of an elderly woman who had a massive stroke. And this was in the emergency room, and running back and forth between her and her family was in conflict in the room over what to do,
Mhm.
and screaming and yelling and tears and sobbing. But she did complete an advanced directive. It was one of the first ones I ever got to apply
Mhm.
as a physician. And I went in the room and they all calmed down. And I said, it says very clearly, if she's an extremist and there's no hope of recovery, and there wasn't in this case, a massive bleed inside the brain,
Yes.
then I want no heroic efforts. And so I read that to them, and I might have thought at that moment, you might think it'll get more explosive. Actually, everybody calmed down. And I said, I'm going to go in the room and I'm going to disconnect everything. You can come with me. And they all stood at the head of the bed. I disconnected everything. And they gathered, held her hand, stroked her hair, whispered things in her ears. I think maybe said some prayers or sang some songs. I could only watch for a few minutes. But this family that was in conflict
Hmm.
now had come together. And exactly the story that I experienced then. I had to finish the rest of the shift, but I went home and it took me a few days to process this. I was still in my early 30s, wasn't thinking about death and dying. And I thought, my wife and I are going to be responsible. We're going to complete our forms right now. And we did. And you're so right on that point. Avoids family conflict, saves money, and respects your own values. That's patient empowerment in a nutshell.
It is. So what do people do with their advanced directives once they get them?
There's three parts to this whole equation. Nothing legal needs to happen. You don't need a lawyer. You can get one online for free. So first, people need to complete them. Look
Mhm.
in the mirror. That's the only person who can do it. Not your friend, not your spouse, not your spiritual advisor, not your elected officials. You get to do that. Now, when my kids turned 18, Daddy gave them advanced directives to complete. Now, a couple are married, and they've updated them. So first, you have to complete it. Then it needs to be available. That is to say, not locked in a safety deposit box. And
Exactly.
that's one of the reasons I like mydirectives.com, because I carry
Mhm.
this with me. And
Mhm.
and and wherever I am in the world or in the United States, a clinician, if I can't speak for myself, they can download that from that QR code and get all the information they need, including medical information is in there too. So it needs to be available. And so you should obviously discuss it with your family physician and whoever you like, but it needs to be
Right.
available. And we don't always go to the same hospital for every care. You may be in another state, 500 miles away. What then?
Mhm.
So that's available. And then last piece, and this isn't a hard one, clinicians need to learn to honor them. I think I'm a little older than you, but I don't know what your experience was. But mine was, you never let a patient die on your shift. When the patient dies, you failed. We can't guarantee people life. People say, you don't want to take away hope. This isn't taking away hope. This is giving hope that your death will be a comfortable transition passage, not some horrible thing that you really didn't want. So clinicians, we have to learn to use these documents, and for any clinicians out there, there are things now called wrongful life lawsuits. That is, where clinicians have ignored the wishes of patients and patients have sued. That's a really new phenomena. So if you're a clinician, you ought to know what's going on. in that regard. So I wrote a couple of books on the subject, endorsed by Maya Angelou and U.S. senators and famous people from around the United States. So I tried to summarize all of this in various ways and stories that would enable people to take the first step if they haven't already, and then to bring it up to others. Bring it up to your family, your friends, where you worship, the neighbor across the backyard, because only 40% of us have done this, and it should be 95%, 99%.
So tell us about your books.
So in 2010, I wrote the first book called The Better End, Surviving and Dying on Your Own Terms, Today's Modern Medical World. And there's the Maya Angelou quote. And I was very fortunate in my life, blessed to be friends with Maya Angelou for many years and actually spent time with her. That's quite a wonderful experience for me. And then updated it with this book, also from Johns Hopkins Press. And it's available through the usual sources, Amazon and so on. And there's a Kindle version. So this is, I do talks on the subject. I'm happy to go any place to talk on this wherever possible. But it all boils down to individual empowerment, which is why I'm so happy to be with this theme with you. This is really about, the healthcare system, many times it tends to push people and clinicians and patients around. It shoves us in different paths. This isn't, completing advanced directive isn't a guarantee of anything, but it shifts the likelihood significantly towards something that you want. All this for free paperwork that's readily available. It's been around since 1991. So our culture, which celebrates individual autonomy and respect for personal rights, because this is talking about end-of-life care, we've collectively not taken advantage of this. So not completed these forms. So National Healthcare Decisions Day, every year, April 16th, it comes around. It's officially recognized in many states, including Maryland, because I did the bill. And April 15th is another day we all remember. That's the taxes day.
Yeah.
No, April 16th is the day after taxes. You've just done that paperwork. It's the death and taxes linkage. Somebody thought of that, not me. And so that's the day that you should complete your advanced directives, or maybe a day to bring it up to other people or in your community or wherever you tend to, where you work, where you worship. However it is, say National Healthcare Decisions Day is coming up. Let's complete our advanced directives.
Thank you so much for this valuable information. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience today?
Yeah, the main reason to do this is, of course, for personal care value reasons, but it's also an important way to save money. And let me be specific, because right now in the news, there's a lot of discussion about Medicare expenditures and what kind of fixes is going to happen for Medicare, which is healthcare for seniors and categories of disabled people, but primarily seniors. Medicare is about almost $900 billion. $300 billion of it, that's billion with a B, is spent in the last months of life. In fact, for most of us, probably a third or more of the healthcare dollars we spend in our lives are spent in the last months of life. Now, if the rate of completion was normative, and this has been done in a town called La Crosse, Wisconsin, where they actually had this commitment to raise their rate of advanced directive completion from the standard 40% to 95%. Every death that doesn't, because most of us don't choose, I want the full court press, everything, every time for every condition. Most of us don't choose that. Some do, but most don't. If you saved 10, every death that doesn't happen in an intensive care unit, but happens in the hospital, or doesn't happen in a hospital, but happens in a hospice facility, or doesn't happen in a hospice facility, but happens at home with home hospice, you reduce costs tremendously. And so if the rate of completion of advanced directives went up among the Medicare population, which is a little higher because it's seniors, but still, not even half, and you save 10 or 20% of that $300 billion, that's $30 to $60 billion saved.
That's profound.
Usually we save money in healthcare by creating systems nobody understands, by putting burdens on taxpayers and employers, by creating a system that employees have to pay more, more co-pays and paying clinicians less, all these other ways we try to, quote, save money in healthcare. Here's a way you save a lot of money in healthcare potentially by empowering patients and respecting their values. That's a good deal.
That is tremendous. So that's that much more money that can be spent on vital things. to impact patient care. And at the same time, people have their dignity. That's so important. You do not want to be at the end stages of life and have all these things done to you that you just don't want to have done. And so a person's dignity and that person's right to choose, those things are of paramount importance. And so this information is very invaluable. And I hope a lot of the listeners will go out and make those decisions today and do the things that need to be done.
Free legal paperwork, mydirectives.com, AARP. If you have a very devoted to one religion, there's faith-based ones from the different religions that are in the United States. So, but I like My Directives because it's simple and straightforward. You can change it anytime you like. And you can upload one of the other ones into the My Directive system, by the way. You can just stick it in there. So you don't even have to, you can follow their format if you like, but if you've completed one from some other source, there's like 5 Wishes and others that are out there, you can just upload that into the My Directive system. And then it's available nationally.
Great. So how would you want people to reach you? How could they reach out to you if they have more questions or they would like to learn more?
Well, first, if they want to learn more, I think the easiest thing to do is get the book, Preparing for a Better End from Johns Hopkins Press or Amazon and so forth, because we can't go into all the issues here. But I'm available directly. My name is my email, danmorhaim@gmail.com, DANMORHAIM. And there's a book website, www.thebetterend.com, not bitter, thebetterend.com. And that summarizes the book, has a list of endorsements and where to get it. And look, I understand this is a challenging topic, but we can overcome our anxiety, face the reality, and then be empowered to act. And that's really what this is all about.
And when you're empowered, that takes away a lot of fear and anxiety because you know what to expect and you don't have to be so focused on what your family is going to be going through because you've already taken care of those things. And so this is certainly incredible information. And at the end of this video, I'm going to have a screen with information about how to get your book and how to contact you. Your books, I'm sorry. So thank you so very much.
Well, let me say, just get the second book because the newer one is much more comprehensive and goes into things that the first book did not. So that's Preparing for a Better End.
All right. So we'll definitely make
2020.
Sure know how to acquire the book. So thank you so very much again for being here. You have a blessed day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.